My name's Jason Rowe. I'm the leader of the Unification Party, and this is our multiple attempt, but our first recorded broadcast of our first show. Go ahead, introduce yourself, sir.
My name is Adrian Blizzard. I am Jason's friend as well as the second member of the Unification Party. And this is our attempt at a discussion about current events that have led to us starting this party.
Absolutely. So let's not bore people all together with a 30-minute diatribe about what we're all about. But the basic brass tacks is it seems to be there's two narratives that are going on, and one is USA wants Canada, and Canada will never be the 51st state, and those seems to be everyone stuck in those gears. Essentially, our goal would be to have some sort of more positive dialogue as opposed to not talking about what we don't want to be, talking about perhaps a unification of all of North America, or at the very least Canada and the USA, into a juggernaut power entity. At no time are we suggesting that Canada needs to give up its sovereignty or its gun laws or its health care or any of the things that it deems near and dear. But Canada could perhaps benefit from a economic union and a militarily defensive union, and at least a discussion should be that should be out there. And I guess we'll just get started on, as of today, I guess today is the very first day where it's no longer bluster or talk. Trump has applied 25% tariff to Canada, and people are going nuts. So what do you got to say, my friend?
Yeah, it's all over today. Not only down south on the news and on various social media talking points, but up in Canada, it's all the rage. Everybody in a different position has something to say on the matter or something to show. Like there was videos of some of the liquor stores in Ontario packing up the booze. There was premiers going out. And I just actually saw before we started, Doug Ford canceled Starlink Ontario contract. Now, I don't know if that's for the people or for the province. I would hope it's probably with the province. They're probably not. Maybe they're banning it. I don't know. But like everybody's up in a tiff. That is for sure. And I even saw today Chrystia Freeland, our former Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, who's running to be the head of the Liberal Party, according to the Telegraph, was talking about some sort of an arrangement with the British military that'll involve nuclear weapons to help us stave off a potential American invasion in the future. So a lot of wild rhetoric going on today. That is for sure, Jason, I would say. Anything you've seen that maybe I didn't mention?
No, for sure, all of that. But I find it funny that, like, have you met any real people who are fired up, like people in the streets, like that you talk to who are like talking about this? Have you run into any of that?
At a glance, and it would be most of the time that I would have it running like that, it would be at my work. So I err on the side of avoidance just to not bring politics to the office, so to say. So I do hear people that are worried about it, and I hear more through friends of a friend who like are still staying in the big cities, unlike myself, who interact with a lot of like the bigger city type people and urbanites or whatever. And some people are pretty wild up. And I actually have a theory that like these people are getting so wild that they're actually making some of their once progressive liberal friends moderate. And you know, nowadays by that metric, that means they're far right, like jokingly. But some people are really losing it. Like I got one friend of a friend who is losing sleep over a trip to Disney World that is planned in the near future. And it's just wild to me that that's even a thing, let alone like actually losing your mind. I feel bad for the guy.
I would say at my business, I can't talk to people openly about this because you've got to keep customers happy, of course. But I would say out of the number of people who've come through, let's say in the last 2 weeks, who have even, like Dave, offered an opinion on it one way or the other. I'm not even going to get into what anybody said per se. I'm just saying, let's say I see 50 people a day. I've had 2 people maybe take a stab at talking about it. So I wonder, it's so funny because like now, but mind you, when I look on obviously on Facebook, I look on this, I look on that, you see like elbows up, Canada proud, blah blah. We'll never be, you have Mike Myers on Saturday Night Live with the
Not for sale.
yeah. I just don't know. Are these people for real? Are people really scared about that? Am I just out of touch? I sometimes wonder if I'm the crazy one because if it just doesn't seem, and it even seems even like Donald, or not Donald Trump, but Trudeau today, he's like still disrespectful, calls him Donald. They all act like
Calls them
he's crazy.
calls them
Yeah,
dumb tariffs.
yeah.
Like,
And
yeah,
then
just like
talks to him like,
words.
and I even saw a CBC today, like the CBC host was talking about like like her mind couldn't comprehend what this madcap guy who doesn't know what's going on in the states is doing. Trump, he's crazy. And I just wonder, like, is this like a psyop? Is this like I'm not even getting to the point of whether I'm pro or for or against, just as a starting point to talk about it. Like, is this a psyop? Like, I look at these like thousands of posts. So even if assume, let's say 10% of them are bots, and I'm not even gonna get into any of that, but so 50% even, there's still thousands and thousands of comments on people like, oh, I'll never shop in the States again. And Donald Trump is going to steal my children and sell them to gypsies. And it's like, I just can't imagine people living in like that state and frame of mind. Is it
Well,
entertainment?
well, okay. One thing on a note of that, like our government last week opened up refugee status to QIA LGBTQIA plus refugees from America. So, I mean, why would you do that? It's not like they're being hunted in the streets. They're just being made to feel mildly uncomfortable and not like superior bullies anymore. It's I think like in the last 10 years there's been a huge disconnect, and you have two different worlds the West has been living in, and this is maybe just a clash of that. But it kind of like to what you were saying before about, is it a psyop, is it real, what is it really going on, is it authentic? I saw an excerpt today from 1984 about the part where like during the hour of hate, where like they're yelling at Eurasia for the last 15 minutes, and then they immediately switch to like Oceania's the enemy and Eurasia's now our ally, and everybody just like immediately like swallowed it because they didn't want to commit a thought crime. Everybody just went along with it, and it seems to me like a lot of that, where it's just like, oh, the big head said it. So I mean, did you see what the big head said?
I
Kind of.
guess. Yeah.
I get like because I sincerely believe that it would be better for the average Canadian if we were to amalgamate with the United States on an economic and military cooperation level, or even some sort of a annexation. Become like a big Puerto Rico and keep our autonomy to some level, right? But I don't. I understand that not every Canadian would agree with that. Maybe I don't expect them to right off the hop. But if you're sincerely to sit down and look at the benefits for the average Joe and Jane, life would be better. I think I see it really only overturning the apple cart for the established, so to say, oligarchs of Canada, like the Boffins and the Westons and
They
the
will
so and
not
so's,
be
the big boys.
named.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the big boys in Canada, they're going to have to be a little bit more competitive. But for the average person, I see it being a complete win. So for arguably everybody in Canada to get a free $5 million gold card from Donald Trump, and we're up in arms and nose in the air about it, it's funny to me. It's just to watch this all play out.
Well, I remember last week when we tried to video record that thing, we were talking about the future being the Arctic, and that
Mm-hmm.
it's funny what we spoke about last week when we were saying that Europe can't fight Putin, which is on their doorstep. So what makes us in Canada think that Europe would be over here to defend us if our northern sovereignty and 50 to 100, if it's the Northeast Passage and through the north there, or that, like we discussed, 20% shorter trip from Beijing to New York City. So 7 days at sea for shipping bigger
Using the
boat.
Arctic Circle shipping. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that seems to be going to be coming into play. And so, like you said earlier, Chrystia Freeland claiming that, Britain and France are going to cross the ocean to come to our defense here. I mean, that seems pretty
I didn't say
unlikely.
France was involved. I said the UK, but
There was some talk of that in something that
it
I saw as well.
but to your point, yeah, like the absurdity that like the UK is can't even maintain the war they've been trying to stoke for the last 5 years in Ukraine with I think they're like 68,000 active service members or something, and yet somehow we're going to sign a deal with them because they're going to stop America from like taking us over. If in fact that was the reality of what Trump was talking about, it's just, you know what I mean? Like I
Well, I
don't
mean,
think the Canadian Army
Trudeau.
could.
Yes, sorry. Go ahead.
I don't think the Canadian Army could hold Sault Ste. Marie, let alone like the whole country. If America truly wanted to like harbor a hot war against us, which would just be like the biggest joke ever. Like I don't.
Well, I don't.
I
Well, I
mean,
mean, I don't imagine anybody's thinking that at this time. But even Trudeau said today the goal of Trudeau indicated in his counter speech that he believed the goal of Trump was to weaken Canada enough economically that we would be easier for the annexin, all the easier for the annexin. But and that could very well be, but
good
it
news
also
for us if you like
well,
America and their
well,
freedom.
I guess, but that's not like that wouldn't be my goal per se. I mean, I know you're much more pro being
First and Second
annexed.
Amendment to start, like yeah.
Yeah. You love that stuff, and that's cool. I'm more like, oh, we've got a big Arctic, and we don't have the money, the
I'm about
manpower
that
to
too.
develop
I'm
it.
about that
No,
too.
no, I get
I've
that.
actually I've thought for years I would take like $20 today and I would go live in like an igloo for the government for like a year at a time, like maybe some sort of a radio thing, and I check the ice level for something. Like I've had that thought in the back of my head. So I like the Arctic too, and I love Canada. I just like you're saying, like if we can't survive on our own without the America giving us handouts, then like it's over. The game's over.
Yeah, but I guess I mean, that's only one part of the equation. It's also there seems to be a populist leftist ideological clash that is involved in all of this as well, which I mean,
Well,
we
it's
can't even get
reinvaded the
into it,
liberals.
but yeah.
Well, it did reinvigorate the Liberal Party in our country over the last 2 weeks, according to the polls and stuff like that. So that's for sure.
Again, but I wonder if that's a psyop. Like, I don't even
I couldn't
know.
agree with you more.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I can't imagine the average person is just not like sick to death of what is happening in general, whether they blame the liberals or not. Just in general, people must be sick to death of what's happening around them, for sure. Even if you're one of the few who's doing okay.
For sure, but I think a lot of people are like you and I, where we're more. There's a lot more politically homeless people than it may seem, and just as far as like there, if you do go too far down the rabbit hole, you almost get a political apathy where you're just kind of like, yeah, they're all criminals. Do my own thing and not vote, and then you know what I mean. So, but yeah, you're right. So for it to resurgence, like all of a sudden, all these people, like it was a wild swing too in the last 2 weeks, which is, and let alone political polls, like are always, anyways, they're all bullshit, typically. So, but I don't know. It's the thing with psyops, Joe, though, Jay, is they do work, or they wouldn't do them, even if it is that.
Well, I mean, there clearly seems to be a coordinated effort to paint this as there's two ways of framing this, that we must band together as a 50, like, anti the 51st state. And there's no any other talk of any other thing other than that is your Putin's boyfriend, essentially, ultimately. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, it's America's going to invade us, and let's also send the army over to Ukraine at the same time. Like all
And
at
if
the, in the
and if you feel that way, let's be as antagonistic as possible at
yeah,
every level of government to the so-called madman bully South, and so be as antagonistic as
yeah.
possible.
We're
It
like
doesn't
we're
even
like
make
bees.
sense.
We're like a bee's nest that lives next to bears, and we're like, let's go. Let's all go fuck the bears up. It's like no. They're going to come and take their little bit of honey. They always take, but we don't attack them, and they leave us be, and we make more honey next year. But now we're throwing like, yeah,
I don't get that.
it's
I don't get that.
the poor analogy, or why we're acting so antagonistically.
Well, I understand the poor analogy, but I don't get why across the board, with the exception of maybe Danielle Smith and a few other people who've sounded pretty moderate. Almost everyone is like Doug Ford's gonna, turn the light switch off to upstate New York, I guess, or whoever.
In Michigan. Yeah, what are you doing?
Is that
And
what you do?
the
No, but
irony
wait,
there is Michigan and New York are like they hate Trump too. Like so it's like you're actually hurting your own people kind of on the sentiment side of it. Kind of like when like to the point of like a week ago when the BC premier was talking about targeting Republican states. You're hurting states that voted blue is what I'm saying. Although I think
absolutely.
Michigan went Republican this time. They got
I don't
Detroit.
know.
No, I think that was key. I think anyways, regardless.
Yeah, I'm just thinking what's crazy is that if I don't remember correctly, under Trump, USA became energy independent. Now I
The fracking.
understand that well, no, but they were, so I'm sure that means they ship some out from there and they use some from Canada up there and whatnot. But
Mm-hmm.
logistically, if America can be self-sufficient in energy, they could, over a window period of time, feed energy to upstate New York and Michigan and wherever. And then what would we do? What would Quebec and what would Ontario do with their excess hydro? Who do they sell it to? Battery
Well,
ships?
in
Battery
that
ships
world,
to Europe?
my concern in that world is more so like not only that, but also like now that would be a world where we're not selling our oil to the States. So it's either going on a train to Vancouver to China to be refined, or we're actually going to finally build that pipeline to like New Brunswick to where the refinery is, or wherever the refinery is. Or maybe we just I don't know why we don't build refineries enough out there, but essentially we need to start mining our like refining our own gas, like our own oil, and we because it all goes down to Houston, I'm pretty sure.
But don't you think it'd be easier just to use the existing pipelines and have a sensible approach to uh, and integrating economies and our dollars and our oils and our
I,
aluminums and
I think
our aluminiums?
I think even in a world if Canada's annexed or not annexed, I think we should have a pipeline from east to west, just in case there's an emergency. Like maybe there's a bad earthquake. Like let's even if we had the American Union one day, but even if there's a
Well,
bad earthquake and it gets destroyed, you always want to have backups and like just contingency after contingency. Like it flows in all directions most of the time, and sometimes if there's stuff that happens, we got to do work. It doesn't have to. We got refineries all over. Why
yeah,
not?
yeah. Well, there's probably 100 million reasons why not.
For sure. It's not a video game. This is real life. Like
Yeah, there's probably a lot of reasons. But yes, of course, if we're not going to cooperate down south, then obviously a pipeline here, there, somewhere. Those are we'd have to do it, or what do we do? Dump it, carry it by barrels to
But
again,
yeah,
it's crazy.
you are right. Like I can't even like I'm a sucker for playing devil's advocate in all aspects of any conversation just for conversation's sake. But I can't for the life of me look at the actions of Doug Ford, Chrystia Freeland, any of the Canadian leaders. I mean, even actually, I will say, like, I saw Mr. Trudeau's speech today, like, and it actually didn't look all that bad. Had it been like the first time I saw the man speak, I might have been like mildly impressed. Had I not been governed under his leadership for the last over a decade, and have my own views on him, he would probably be the most reasonable. But even him, he was like poking the bear with the antagonism. I just don't see how Canada can win the game with 7 deuce offsuit. Like this
Yeah,
is like
that's
it.
that's the simplest way to put it. Exactly. It just seems like
Like,
inevitable. Like all of this. If let's just say let's play the worst case scenario. Everyone, Trudeau can read Trump's mind, and he's looked deep into the dark crevices. And Trump's plan is to bring Canada economically to its knees until we're begging to integrate. Then what they're doing is still crazy, right? The
exactly. We're going to
response
pay
is
more
still
for internet.
crazy.
They clearly use Starlink in Ontario because it was probably the only option for the value it provided. I know I use it for that reason. Um, the alcohol, like, who cares, right? You already paid for it. They already got the money. Like the nukes with Britain, like, I mean, that's insane. What are we talking about? Nukes? What that now that again, that was a headline. I didn't see her
Yeah, yeah,
say it, so I'll give
yeah.
it that. But the fact that they're even throwing that word around in headlines when it comes to three best buddies, like the Five Eyes, like we all are a part of like intelligence packs. Like we're supposed to get along, and it clearly just goes to show like the divide between like Trump being anti-establishment and like pretty much every country having like an establishment leader. So like Trump's overturning the apple cart, and they're just not happy about that. So I think they were calling it the rules-based international order, and they want to get back to that. Sounds
Yeah,
nice, doesn't it?
yeah. But I mean, I
Rules.
don't know. Is there merit to the fact that US of A, as Trump would say, has been footing the bill for in the way of tariffs and nation building, and I'm sure not without their kickbacks and their, their own economic good, but I don't even know. Is there even merit to what he is saying? Is that even the? How do we even know? How could we know? Like these trade
Well, that
deficits, I don't know.
and that's kind of what Mr. Trudeau was saying, and he was basically like laid it out like we did everything you guys asked, and like what is happening? He looked dumbfounded and like really upset, and I mean I might not like the man, but I will say like if he did in fact do everything that Trump asked and then he still did it, I mean yeah, like Trump's just being a wild man, which is to be expected, and that's a
No, but as
reason.
we discussed this before, same thing as that was that a few of his economic advisors and that other
Correct.
last guy, Lighthinger, I think his last name was, who has this whole 41-page paper that's the reorganizing of the global order, world order, trade order. And it was Trump had an agenda. And we even said before in discussions that we knew the pretext of fentanyl and a porous border was just like it made it legal for him to leap into action and unilaterally put these tariffs in place with a executive order as opposed to going through the normal channels. So
Well, and supposedly the whole zenith for this 51st state Trudeau, Governor Trudeau talk was when Trudeau went down to Mar-a-Lago and supposedly told Trump without these trade agreements, like Canada won't survive, which essentially, from Trump's response, these trade agreements were subsidies by the American economy to some extent. So, I mean, if if that's true, I mean, that's where we're getting it from, right? Like that's what started all this. So then it's like, well, maybe Trump's just drawing a magnifying glass to like an inefficiency in the market, which would be the Canadian economy, which as a Canadian living here, looking down south for the last, you know, 30, 20 years with open eyes, as I'm not 20, but I've been paying attention for 20 years. Everybody who works a little bit harder in Canada looks at the States and is like, yeah, wouldn't it be nice? Oh man, just a little bit of red tape, I could be so much better off. We would have so much of a bigger house, da 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 da. Like,
yeah, but I don't
and
even know. Do most people even think that? I don't even know.
well, not most people aren't that hardworking and entrepreneurial, but I'm saying the entrepreneurial Canadians who like have a modicum of understanding what goes on down south in their line of work, more often than not, are mildly jealous due to the lack of regulation and the openness to conduct business.
See, I went to university in the States and traveled in the States. I wouldn't say a huge amount, but I've sampled what it's got going on down there. And I don't know, it seems like their strict nice neighborhood versus bad neighborhood dichotomy is kind of not that tasteful. I didn't like that. I like that even if even Toronto, as much as people would bitch, there was no real, now people will probably argue with me here, but, oh, they've changed, they'll say, but there was no real bad neighborhoods downtown, and you could pretty much walk around and live here and there, and it wasn't so bad, but you don't do that in the States. And
I would agree with you that the lens of like the contrast between the rich and the poor in the States, even as a young man going down for family visits and stuff, it was noticeable and it did bother me too. Like I remember the first time driving through Lincoln Park, like outside of Detroit on the highway, and seeing like 911s and like Denali's outside of like houses that were dilapidated, and I just couldn't wrap my head around the economics of these people's lives. Like, how do you get in a $90,000 car and live in a $20,000 house? But I will say that to that point, over Mr. Trudeau's tenure in office, that poverty and that class difference is, I think, we have that in full swing in Canada now. Like, it
We
used to
do,
not
but
be so bad.
I don't think it's the same to the same degree.
No, I
And I know,
agree. I'm not saying it's
we
the
can get
same, but it
into,
used to
yeah.
really.
And I'm sure in the States, there's a lot of like towns you can just go to, nice sized towns where everything's super nice and whatnot. But I would say those
But
type of the worst case, the worst parts. I get why the people here in Canada define themselves by "we're not the USA," because this is the sentiment that they're talking about. Is these things that are hard to talk about and they're hard to figure out and they're hard to put your fingers on, but they have some past racial things that are different to our racial things, and they have some past
yep,
economic things that are different to our economic things, and they've got all kinds of. But I think when people in Canada, they're afraid of importing that, and I don't think their minds can go beyond that. I understand why the people want to post, you know, inflammatory, outrageous things online about, like, the I guess their mind can only comprehend it as that he has to be crazy, right? They can't.
yeah. Well, they just picture the movie RoboCop coming to their doorstep, and like they don't want that to happen. Yeah, no,
Yeah, they don't want to live in a Detroit, or what we perceive as a Detroit to be.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, they don't want the country to. But I mean, I know we have our problems too, but they seem to be. They're much less in play, I would say, than they are in American cities, at least that I went to.
Well, I, I'm kind of visualizing it now, and like though the thing I like about America as I get older is that it's a republic, which is like a bottom up form of government versus our constitutional monarchy, which is top down. And I would say to your point of like that contrast in the States, you see that in Canada, it would kind of just be like a decent middle ground, and then like a couple elites that you wouldn't really notice, and a couple really poor people that you wouldn't really notice. I think that kind of goes to the point of like top down, bottom up. Like, whereas like in the States, if you want to go hustle, like you can move to the bad neighborhood and get your first rental property and like fix it up and like hustle and maybe get your second rental and then work hard and then move out to that nice suburb. Whereas in Canada, it's like there really isn't that fixer upper in many places. You know what I mean? It's kind of like all a little Lamont, Whereas like I don't know, that's just a contrast I kind of realized there with your bringing that perception up, because I have the same perception too, especially as a younger person. You notice that contrast in Buffalo and Detroit, especially, which coming from Southern Ontario, both of us would be cities we interacted with quite frequently, and both of those cities were beaten up since the 50s by industrial like manufacturing leaving the states.
Yeah,
So they weren't.
I lived in Rochester for 2 years, so
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
got to see what that was all about. But again, that's not necessarily indicative of the rest of the United States. But we watch TV; they present an image. We get some idea. But
Yeah.
I get why people don't want what they perceive that to be here. I get that. But it seems to me, and that's kind of where this conversation comes into play, is how do we get more people to, obviously we're not going to win this next election, the Unification Party, and we probably won't win.
A man can dream.
We probably, man, can
A
dream.
man can dream. A
But
man can dream.
how can we get more people to want to talk about this, which I think is a sensible approach? Like, I'm for the most part pretty apolitical in the past. I've sort of thought a lot of it is WWF, right? Just, oh, there's my guy's winning, yay, oh, your guy's winning. But this seems to be of such critical importance, and when you start making huge economic like pipelines and things of that, these infrastructure projects that take 10, 15, 20, 30 years to realize, and you start, because Trudeau's got a bee at his bonnet, he's stomping his
Close it
feet.
down. Sell it.
Yeah, sell it, move it, do it. I hate Donald Trump, so we're not going to do this sensible thing. When this is the road that we're on, somebody needs to have somebody talk about something.
Well, I would say
a better
especially from the
option.
perspective of the angry Canadians at the moment about even the topic of the 51st state. We can all agree that like America is the big guy on the block, call him the bully on the block, whatever. I say the whole point of doing it by our approach of starting this party and trying to have a civil discord on the topic, we're kind of trying to let's, as Canadians, broach the subject with America diplomatically so we can maintain our sovereignty versus like they just show up one day like they kind of did today with the tariffs and, tell us what's up. That's the way I see it. Like, why not like try and have a civil discord on the topic as opposed to just like emotion, like we lose because they're bigger. Why not? Maybe we might be able to win a little and hold on to some of our sovereignty if we're diplomatic, which is, used to be one of our strengths, or at least our perceived strength. Thank God to our great media. But,
Yeah. Yeah.
they always
Well,
say the pen is mightier than the sword.
and we do
There's a
have
reason.
some cards to play. We're not quite a seven deuce. We're a seven deuce offsuit if we're going to take them head on. But if we're playing other sort of long-term strategy games, not just a quick game of poker, we've got a lot of, we got a lot of things the biggest economy in the world would need. But at the same time, like I said, I was listening to that guy, that Peter Zihan today, and he was saying, with the exception of like Alberta and Saskatchewan, the rest of the country seemed like, again, critical minerals aside, well, since we won't dig them up anyways, they are aside, saying the rest of the country is pretty much an aging liability to begin with. So I don't understand, unless Trump wants, unless we go back to that Arctic discussion, and he sees it as a militarily strategic to the northern protection of, the Monroe Doctrine, this hemisphere can't be impinged upon by anyone else in the world. So yeah, I don't know. That's not
Well,
distracting at all.
I mean,
The cat is not distracting.
I genuinely can't think of the moves that have happened today from our leaders, though, how they help us at all. Because even Trump's message, I shared that with you, I think, where he said at noon or something like, "Yeah, every tariff you guys had to us, we had the same. So keep it going." So it's just like, okay, so call that bluff. What's next? Like they just don't lose. Like America, like what? We're like 1.98 them, and they're 90% us. So it's over. Like I don't even know why everyone's so mad. Like we set the deck up like this. It was an inevitability of it.
Yeah, so okay, so that aside, since our guys, let's assume for this conversation that our brave leaders, Carney and Trump, or Trudeau and Freeland, they're
No, you got it right. You got it right the first time. Trump's the leader.
they're
Just joking.
ideologically captured, and
Mm-hmm.
they genuinely believe that Trump is a bumbling madman who doesn't know how to do anything and is just making things up for no reason. So that's what it appears that we have. So I'm going to go with that. So they respond in a logical way, I guess, but just believing that the truth of their, like, justice will prevail, I guess. I don't know.
I, I just, I
Is
just
that
think.
what fuels them? Like, what fuels that belief? Like, or what do you think is
Well,
their
the only thing
belief?
I think for starters, they're so used to media capture and just winning the media war. So I think they got to go out there and cheerlead for their captured audience for starters. And they know that they could tell their audience anything anyway. So like, for all we know, they're all in DC right now, bending over, signing some deal, and they'll go on the news tomorrow and still shake their hand at them. So I don't know. Yeah, like I just think it's all a bunch of jokes. Like I heard even today about the Europeans, they bought more Russian oil and gas this year than they've given to Ukraine in like military aid, which I don't know about you, but like if you're so hell bent on fighting a war against somebody, those numbers don't add up to me. So it's all just one big bunch of hypocritical hand waving socialists just trying to, like, grease their palms, I guess. I don't know. Like, it'll be interesting to see, especially after the State of the Union that's going on right now. I'm sure he's going to give somebody more fuel to be unreasonable in front of a microphone in Canada.
Well, he said, didn't he say? I mean, it was funny. Like today, the news of the tariffs or the implementation of the tariffs today, like literally, like rippled through Canada like it was the biggest event since the last huge event of whatever. And then Trump doesn't even address it in the media today. He like a truth social tweet or something about truth about it or something. And then he was more focused on this NATO or what people believe he's going to be saying, which is tonight, I guess, that they're leaving NATO and leaving the World Health Organization, or that's what people have guessed is the big news that he's going to give. So clearly, this Canadian retaliatory tariffs are not top of his concern list. It
Very
seems
true. It reminds me of when he was here meeting with Trudeau 7 or 8 years ago before he met with Kim Jong Un, and like he was leaving Canada. When he left Canada to go to Singapore to meet with Kim Jong Un or Korea, I don't know, or Vietnam. I think it was in Vietnam, but either way, he was trying to settle things down over there. Like Trudeau, like gets off as soon as Trump's on the plane and Trudeau's on in front of the cameras, just spouting off, kind of like kind of like Hugh Grant in Love Actually, just telling him we won't be pushed around or whatever. And it's like, buddy, like even if you don't like the guy, like he's about to go like try and broker like some sense of calm with North Korea, like. Can you just like leave him alone for 48 hours? Like in my mind, like obviously the Western elites are like, oh, Mr. Trudeau, you're so brave and handsome. Thank God you said something. But like, it's just like, give your heads a shake here about what's really happening. And just like right now in Canada, like, what are we like? Unfortunately, I think it's just like the jig is up. Like, you're right. We don't have necessarily 7-2, and you can win with 7-2 sometimes if you play your hand right. I just don't think we're playing our hand right.
yeah, it seems at all like none of it makes sense. None of it adds up. But okay, so for funsies, since we can't figure out what our own guys are doing, and if we like the only person who seems to be talking a bit, kind of talking about what we're talking about is Kevin O'Leary, as I've seen in some of his interviews, talking about an economic partnership, a joining together, a union of some sort. Kevin O'Leary's talked about that, and he has some sensible talk about stuff like that. But since you changed your earphone, I'm getting feedback.
Sorry. I wanted to hear the animals. I thought I heard the goats. Were you leading to like what would you do? What would I do?
No,
I'm going to
ask. If I'm going to ask you where I'm leading to exactly is what do you think Trump's ultimate game is from the stuff we've talked about, stuff you've heard, and what would you hypothesize is Trump's ultimate motivation here?
Not to sound like a cheesy bumper sticker, but to make America great again. Like he wants to bring manufacturing back to America. He wants to reinvigorate the middle class. He wants to help bring back the hollowed out jobs to like the battered middle class. And it's that simple. And that's why, like, as terrible as the annexation sounds, if we're a part of them, we'll be that middle class that gets to be reinvigorated as opposed to.
Would you say his motivation is altruism to the middle class, or is it more of narcissism where he's like will be praised as the guy who, or both?
I would say more number two, but there's also like number three, like we're both sensible. Like obviously, like we're not in Trump's head, but on a optimistic perspective, I would say it's sincere because you could see the clips from him like on Oprah in '80s, like '86. He's saying the same thing he's saying today. So there's obvious, like I can't help but assume there's a bit of sincerity to see clips of a guy from longer than I've been alive saying the same thing relatively about like these trade deals are killing us. Like there's not good for the American worker. And like he was always kind of like that blue collar Queens guy. So like even when he had the big jobs going on, like he could go down and talk to the tradesmen and the union and the Teamsters and on their own level, like not like some like hoity-toity, like something. I bet you Mark Carney hasn't talked to a tradesman in over a decade. And if not, it's the guy that owns the company now, type of thing. You know what I mean? Like, whereas I wouldn't be surprised. I bet you Trump's talked to some, blue collar guy in the last month. Maybe not in the last month. He's been busy, but you know what I'm saying? Like, he seems
Yeah,
more
yeah,
down to earth with the common person than the average billionaire.
yeah.
That's my impression. Now, maybe Home Alone got to me. I don't know. I honestly never even watched an episode of The Apprentice. Maybe I don't know if I always think like maybe like the twist of fate for me is like I'll catch some episodes of The Apprentice and I'll actually hate him. I mean like who knows, but yeah, I just think he's sincere what he says. Like he's just trying to do that, and that just speaks to me because that's me. Like I'm that hollowed out middle class. Like no, I'm not a victim, but I'm the lower middle class. Like that's my class. So if you're trying to help my class, I can't help but like the guy. So call me selfish.
So it seems that there's I mean, with the looming, what is it, $36 trillion debt in the States or whatever it is, and whatever our $1 trillion debt is here, we're both heading in a disastrous direction. It seems to me like he's taking drastic measures like tariffs, the External Revenue Service, and other things because it's a drastic problem that hasn't been addressed. That seems to me, I guess, because he's a bit of a gambler, which is probably what the situation needs. Doesn't mean he'll win, but it seems like this is a unique
Do or
opportunity.
die. Do or
Yeah,
die.
yeah, fair enough.
And I wouldn't even call him a gambler. I would call him more of a risk taker. I
Okay,
mean,
that's a
I've
that's
never
a
I've
fair
never seen him.
that's a
I've never seen him with cards in his hand. There's a lot of famous people who I've seen with cards in their hand. And
no
I used to be a
no.
gambler.
I'll take that. I agree. I agree with I've spent
And
a
that kind of
I've
comes with
spent a
being the
decade.
entrepreneur.
Yeah,
Like you're a risk taker. You're not a gambler.
I spent a decade in a casino.
So did I. But we're not gamblers anymore. We're just
No, we're
risk
not
takers now.
we're not we're just risk takers now.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got nothing to lose, and like when it comes to Canada in particular, it seems like I think from his perspective, especially as a capitalist businessman, it just seems like simple math to him. Like these numbers don't make sense. Make these numbers make sense to me. Why are we paying more for this than we are for that? Like, and I can't blame the guy. Like, if he's seeing people suffer in like West Virginia and South Dakota in the same industries that we're like subsidizing people in Manitoba and Ontario for, well, people in Manitoba and Ontario aren't his people.
Yeah, no, it could be that simple.
Well, because like I said, the zenith of all this was the Trudeau Mar-a-Lago meeting. That's where Governor Trudeau came out of it. That's where if Canada needs this subsidy, then maybe you should become the 51st state. It was just a joke, but it was a joke like all jokes, laced in the truth.
Absolutely. No, for sure. And I know, and I find it funny that, um,
Like obviously a big part of Canada's economy is real estate, and a big part of like most Canadians' savings is real estate, right? So the big part of the Canadian economy is real estate. And if we were to like integrate with the United States, I think that would not be good for Canadian real estate values, which I, as a poor person, think is a great idea. But I could see how, as a homeowner in Canada that's using your house to retire on, you might not like that so much.
why necessarily why does the value of the real estate change?
Well, because I think by the very nature of, say, we're now annexed by the states and we're like whatever, like a big Puerto Rico or whatever, there's just going to be that little bit less of regulation that'll creep in, or at least the notion to deregulate would be spreading. So you'd be able to build more. And as well, like the confines of like where you're stuck in Canada for work, like maybe it wouldn't be so confining. Like maybe there's a lot of people who would love to, like, instead of live in Toronto, go live in Cleveland even, let alone, you know,
Yeah,
Phoenix.
yeah. Potentially, yeah. But I mean, couldn't these things be negotiated and mitigated? Like, why doesn't
Well, I just think
necessarily
the
doesn't
factors as to
necessarily
why Canada's real estate value is so high is the factor, right? Like it's like the crown land and the regulation. So there's a limited, like in a country so large, there's actually just a very handful of places where you can build. Like that's what makes it so high. Whereas by the very nature of joining with them under the auspice of like less regulation, which would clearly be a part of it, it would just kind of naturally go that way.
maybe? Yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying one way or the other. What I thought was interesting, I heard one of the commentators say, someone who know Mr. Trump very well, was talking about how Trump likes to float ideas. And then if like, it's like planting seeds, and like by him saying, buy Greenland, annex Canada, 51st state, 51st state, third
Read the room.
presidency. Yeah, more than that. It's not about reading the room so much as he's planting these seeds and then seeing if they just germinate on their own, right? Whereas if like he's floated out this idea of Canada becoming the 51st state, is he probably obviously didn't sit in his office one day and go, as a single course of action, my plan going forward is to take over Canada, ha ha ha, as he rubs his hands. What most likely happened is, in a list of things that he said, because, you see him give speeches, talk here and there, floating this proposal, that proposal, this proposal. And obviously he hit a nerve with this, Canada's insecurities, that being annexed, that the mere words of suggesting that we'd be annexed is enough to send the entire country into a pearl clutching fit of hysteria. Yeah. So I just find that, so someone who was close to him had commented that and onto him about that, and that even his talk of like running for a third term. Have you heard any talk of that? Third term running?
Yeah, I've heard it. I've heard the talk of it. I don't think I've heard him joke about it once.
Well, that's just
and then I've heard
it.
a
But
bunch of people
that's what
comment
this,
on it.
right? All the things start as a joke, and again, not because he's the evil dictator. It's as this person explained, or that is, it's more that he would be like, the Democrats had a third term president for reasons. So, you guys hate me so much. I would love to be a third term president for reasons, So he throws it out there, he
Well,
floats it out there, and then if it germinates and people get
it's more
behind it,
palatable. It's more palatable when it happens because it's already been stewing around. It's not
yeah.
so. It's
So
not so immediate. Like people aren't as shocked to hear it.
I just
As
thought that
well,
was interesting to
it,
hear.
it's it's been a month and 10 days, and it's been a wild ride since Trump's taken over. There is a world where, like, I'm all for rules, so I don't want him to take a third term. However, there's a case to be made that, like, his first term and the second term he should have won possibly were, like, perhaps, like, the first term was, like, clearly he got boggled down with the Mueller investigation, the Ukraine indictment, and then there was COVID. And there's cases to be made that, like, there was, like, a lot of the stuff was laid out against him by nefarious actors. So you could make a case that, like, he didn't even really have a first term, And if there is, like, at the progress he's going
I don't
for the
know.
last 40 days, in
We'll
4 years, maybe he's arrested some people or there's been some trials where he could make a reasonable case for having his actual second term.
We'll get
Whatever you want.
Alan Dershowitz to weigh in on those constitutional issues, but Mr. Bannon indicated they were working on something. So who knows?
I'll tell you this. I'll take this to the bank. If Mr. Dershowitz is a supporter of Trump's third term, then I don't care what the reason is. I'm 100% behind it.
I'm not suggesting that Mr. Dershowitz is a supporter of his third term. I'm
No,
saying
no.
you would have to
If we
ask
get
him.
to a world, where Dersh on his show is proclaiming the benefits and the logic behind a third term Trump, then that's a world where, like, I'm 100% behind it because clearly some stuff has come to light and things have changed.
What time does that State of the Union come on?
37 minutes ago.
Well, I'm gonna let's leave it there. We've done about an hour's worth of that. By the time I edit, I want to try to keep them to an hour. I'll get rid of some of the bad stuff, the good stuff, add in a bit of this, bit of that, and we'll see what we can come up with. And then next time, let's talk about we'll see what happens between now and then.
Yeah, and if anything funky happens between now and then, I'll give you a call or shoot you a text.
Yeah, exactly. We can do this more often, and now that we've got one level of this technology
we'll get my
sorted.
situation figured out. If this doesn't work, then we'll get there. It'll be good. It'll be good.
Yeah, I
All
think
right,
the
Jay.
big thing is just the big thing with you is you have to avoid movement, like big movement. It makes everything
Like
buffer.
this, like
Yeah,
this.
when you do this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
it
So
often it buffers.
okay.
But other than that,
Yeah,
the
you.
audio seems pretty good.
Yeah, you look a little choppy on my end, and I look fantastic on my end. So that probably might just very well be my
Yeah,
phone.
it could be either way. Yeah, either way. All right, sounds good. I'll talk to you later.
Toodaloo.
Peace.
Wow!